There's a photo of Sally Field that stopped people cold. No red carpet. No designer dress. No spotlight. Just Sally, walking alone, looking smaller than anyone remembered. Quieter. Like she was trying not to take up too much space. And the comments underneath that photo? They were heartbreaking. What happened to her? She looks so different. I don't recognize her. I grew up watching this woman. This makes me want to cry. Millions of people saw that photo. And something about it just hit different. People who never cry over celebrity news found themselves pausing. Scrolling back. Looking again. Because Sally Field isn't just an actress. She's a feeling. She's the woman who made you laugh in Smokey and the Bandit. Who made you cry in Forrest Gump. Who stood on that Oscar stage and said the most unguarded, honest thing anyone had ever said in front of that audience. She made you believe her. Every single time. And now, at 79, something has shifted. Something that fans are only just beginning to notice. But here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. The real story isn't about what she looks like. The real story is about what she's been carrying. 4 decades. Quietly. Alone. And once you hear it, the full story, not the version Hollywood told you, you will never see Sally Field the same way again. Most people think they know her. Flying Nun. Steel Magnolias. Burt Reynolds' girlfriend. Tom Hanks' mama. They remember the smile. That warm, open smile that felt like someone turning on a light in a dark room. The laugh. The way she could make you feel like she was talking directly to you through the screen. But here's the thing. Very few people know the version of Sally that existed before all of that. The version that was frightened. That felt invisible. That was so desperate to be seen. Genuinely seen, that she ached with it. Sally Margaret Field was born on November 6, 1946, in Pasadena, California. On the surface? Normal childhood. Sunny California. Middle-class family. But underneath that surface? Things were already broken. Her parents divorced when she was still very young. Her mother, Margaret, was a warm but fragile woman who needed stability in her life. She found it, or thought she found it, when she remarried. His name was Jock Mahoney. He was an actor. Tall, charismatic, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone turn their head. He was charming with adults. He was good on camera. But behind closed doors, he was something else entirely. And young Sally, quiet, awkward, already unsure of her place in the world, learned very quickly how to make herself small. How to stay out of the way. How to smile when everything inside her was screaming. She became an expert at disappearing. And then, at just 17 years old, everything changed. She auditioned for a new TV show. A silly, light-hearted thing about a nun who could fly. She didn't expect much. She was a teenager who didn't feel special. But she got the part. And overnight? America fell in love with her. Except Sally wasn't sure she deserved it. That voice in her head, the one that had been whispering "you're not enough" since she was a little girl, it didn't go quiet just because people were applauding. If anything, it got louder. Because she knew what she was hiding. And she was terrified that one day, somehow, everyone else would know too. But let's talk about what she built. Because it was genuinely extraordinary. After the Flying Nun, Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with her. She was adorable. She was likable. But nobody took her seriously. Nobody thought she had real depth. She spent years fighting that. Years of walking into auditions and watching people's eyes glaze over because they'd already decided who she was before she opened her mouth. And then came Sybil. A made-for-TV movie about a woman living with 16 different personalities. Each one distinct, each one real, each one born from profound childhood trauma. It was the kind of role that could destroy a career if it went wrong. Sally made it unforgettable. She didn't just play those personalities. She inhabited them. She moved differently. Spoke differently. Breathed differently. You weren't watching an actress perform. You were watching something that felt terrifyingly real. The Emmy she won wasn't just a trophy sitting on a shelf. It was a door flying open. Suddenly, the industry that had underestimated her was paying attention in a completely different way. And then, 1979. Norma Rae. A woman in a sweltering textile factory in the American South. No money. No power. No one listening. But a fire inside her that refused to go out. There's a scene. You probably know it even if you've never seen the film. Sally's character stands up on a factory table. She holds up a handwritten sign. One word. Union. And she just stands there. Surrounded by noise and resistance and people telling her to sit down. She doesn't move. That image became one of the most iconic moments in American cinema. And Sally Field, the girl who learned to disappear, became something she never thought possible. A force. She won the Oscar. She stood at that podium, gracious and tearful and grateful. The room loved her. But inside, even in that moment, she still didn't fully believe she'd earned it. That's the quiet tragedy that was running underneath everything. And then came the 1980s. And Burt Reynolds. Oh, the world loved them together. Burt was magnetic. Loud in the best way. The biggest movie star on the planet at that moment. And Sally, bright, funny, emotionally alive, matched him in ways nobody expected. America watched them on screen and off screen and they couldn't get enough. But relationships between real people are never what they look like from the outside. Burt was a force of nature. Sally was a searcher. Someone still trying to figure out who she was when the cameras weren't rolling. It worked, until the weight of it didn't. When it ended, Sally didn't make a spectacle of the grief. She didn't do the press circuit with a box of tissues. She just quietly carried it, the way she'd always carried everything. You take the hurt. You fold it up. You put it somewhere deep. And you keep moving. She was very, very good at that. And then 1984 arrived. And with it, Places in the Heart. A widow in Depression-era Texas. No resources. No safety net. Just grit and grace and the desperate need to hold her family together when the whole world is working against her. It was a quiet film. But it destroyed you. And Sally won her second Oscar. She walked to that microphone. The room was watching. The cameras were rolling. Millions of people at home were watching. And she said something nobody expected. Something that wasn't in any prepared speech. Something that came straight from that little girl in Pasadena who had spent her whole life wondering if she was enough. You like me. Right now, you like me. The room laughed. A few people cringed. Critics spent the next few decades using that moment as a punchline. But they got it completely wrong. That wasn't vanity. That wasn't arrogance. That was a woman, who had been made to feel worthless before she even understood what that word meant. Finally, in one unguarded, unscripted, trembling moment, allowing herself to feel chosen. It was the most human thing anyone had ever said on that stage. And the world made fun of her for it. That moment told you everything about Sally Field. And it told you something uncomfortable about the rest of us, too. Now here's where the story gets harder to tell. Because while America was celebrating Sally Field, buying tickets, clapping at award shows, putting her face on magazine covers, Sally Field was fighting battles that nobody in that audience could see. And the deepest ones started in childhood. For years, decades, there were small things. Careful pauses in interviews when certain topics came up. A practiced way of steering conversations away from her early home life. Vague references that journalists noticed but never quite pushed on. And then, in 2018, she sat down and wrote it all out. The memoir was called In Pieces. That title was not chosen casually. In that book, written in her 70s, after a lifetime of silence, Sally described what her stepfather, Jock Mahoney, did to her when she was a child. She described abuse. She described the confusion of being a child and not having the language to understand what was being done to you. The shame that plants itself in your body before you're old enough to know it doesn't belong there. The way you learn to smile and perform and be normal on the outside while something inside you quietly fractures. She was in her 70s when she wrote those words. Think about that. More than 50 years of carrying that. More than 50 years of walking onto film sets and accepting trophies and doing press tours and raising children and falling in love, all while holding something that heavy inside her chest. When readers got to those pages, they said they had to stop. Had to put the book down. Had to just sit in the silence for a moment before they could keep going. Because it reframed everything. Every performance suddenly had new depth. Every time Sally Field looked into a camera and made you feel something real, she was drawing from a well that went far deeper than anyone had imagined. She wasn't just acting. She was excavating. But the childhood trauma wasn't the only thing she was managing in silence. There was something else. Something happening to her body that she tried to keep private for as long as she possibly could. And this is where things took a turn that nobody expected. In 2005, Sally Field made an announcement that took courage most people can't fully appreciate. She had been diagnosed with osteoporosis. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Lots of people have osteoporosis. But stop for a second and actually understand what that diagnosis meant for her. Osteoporosis isn't just medical terminology for brittle bones. It is a disease that physically changes your body over time. Your posture shifts. Your spine curves. Your height decreases. Your silhouette, the outline of you, transforms in ways you cannot control no matter how hard you try. For any person, that's frightening. For a woman who had spent her entire adult life in front of cameras, whose body had been analyzed and praised and criticized in magazines for 40 years, it was something else entirely. It was watching yourself change and knowing the world was watching too. But Sally didn't disappear. She didn't check out. She didn't retreat into privacy and let someone else handle the messaging. She stood up and spoke about it publicly. She became a spokesperson for bone health. She talked to women. Millions of women, about getting tested, about calcium, about listening to your body before it forces you to pay attention. She took her private pain and she handed it to other people as a gift. That is exactly who she was. But here's the piece of this story that almost always gets left out. This diagnosis didn't arrive in a vacuum. Sally has spoken, carefully, quietly, about the decades of physical and emotional pressure that Hollywood placed on women of her generation. The obsession with weight. The expectation that you remain perpetually small, light, delicate. The unspoken rules about what an actress's body was allowed to look like. The industry that made her famous had also, in very specific ways, damaged her. And when that photograph circulated, the one that went viral, the one that made fans stop mid-scroll and feel their hearts drop, what they were actually seeing was the accumulated reality of a woman who has lived. Really lived. The comments said she looked different. But different from what, exactly? Different from the woman Hollywood decided she should be? Different from the frozen, ageless version of her we carry in our memories, young and bright and untouched by time? That expectation is not love. That's ownership. And Sally Field never belonged to any of us. She was trying to tell us that. We just weren't ready to hear it yet. There are losses in Sally's life that made headlines. And then there are the quieter ones. The ones she carried without anyone watching. The relationships that ended before she was ready. The years in her 50s and 60s when the phone stopped ringing the way it used to, not because she'd done anything wrong, not because her talent had gone anywhere, but simply because she was a woman getting older in an industry that treats aging women like a problem to be solved. She talked about this. Not with bitterness. Not with rage. Just with a kind of clear-eyed honesty that made it hurt more, not less. She described walking into rooms and feeling the temperature change. Auditioning for roles she would have been offered automatically 15 years earlier, now having to fight for even the chance to be considered. Watching the industry she had given her entire life to slowly, politely, with great corporate professionalism, close its doors to her. The invisibility wasn't dramatic. That's the cruelest part. It was just quiet. Gradual. Like a light dimming so slowly you almost convince yourself you're imagining it. And then one day you realize the room is dark. She said in one interview, and I think about this line all the time, something that went roughly like this: there comes a point where you see the game clearly. You understand it was rigged. And the strange thing is, you still don't fully regret playing. But you can't unsee it once you see it. That's not the kind of thing a bitter person says. That's the kind of thing a person says when they have finally, after a long and painful journey, arrived at the truth. And there's something almost unbearable about watching someone reach that kind of peace, because you know exactly what it cost them to get there. Sally Field, at 79, is not performing anymore. Not in the way she used to. Not in the way the industry expected. She's not scrambling for relevance. Not rebranding herself for a new generation. Not posting carefully curated content to prove she's still vital and young and relevant. She's just present. Honest. Unhurried. Real. And in a world built entirely around noise and performance and the desperate performance of not caring what people think, that kind of quiet authenticity is almost shocking. It's the most radical thing she could possibly be doing. So look at that photo again. The one that broke everyone's heart. The one that made strangers on the internet say what happened to her as if something had gone terribly wrong. Look at it with everything you now know. You're not looking at decline. You are looking at a woman who survived abuse as a child and kept that wound private for 50 years because the world wasn't safe enough to hear it sooner. Who walked into a career that nobody believed in and built something extraordinary through sheer stubborn talent. Who stood on the biggest stages in the world and still, quietly, privately, fought the voice in her head that said she didn't belong there. Who got sick and chose to be visible about it so that other women wouldn't face their diagnosis alone. Who loved deeply and lost pieces of herself in that love and kept going anyway. Who gave everything she had to an industry that eventually, the way the industry always does with women, decided to move on without her. And who chose, when faced with that, not bitterness, not desperate reinvention, but something rarer and harder. Dignity. That photograph isn't a tragedy. It's a portrait. The reason it hit so many people so hard, the reason the comments overflowed with grief and nostalgia and something that felt almost like mourning, isn't really about Sally Field. It's about what she represents to us. She reminds us that time moves. That things change. That the people we love, even the ones we love from a distance, through screens, are human and mortal and carrying things we will never fully see. We want her to stay the way we remember her. Young. Lit up. Frozen in the exact moment we fell in love with her. But that's not love. That's nostalgia pretending to be love. Real love says, I see who you are now. All of it. And I'm still here. Sally Field is still here. She is still talking. Still telling her story, in her own way, on her own terms. Still showing up. Still choosing honesty over the easier, prettier version.